Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing today? All righty. Awesome. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about the TEAS and the HESI A2 exams. This almost certainly won't take the full time just because there's not a lot to say about the HESI as compared to the TEAS, and these are both fairly straightforward tests to get ready for, to take a little bit trickier, and we'll talk about some of those intricacies here. You guys are, I'm assuming, all pre-nursing. Anybody have particular programs in mind? Like programs that need the TEAS versus the HESI versus, say, maybe even the GRE? Samuel, right? I think they're TEAS, right, for their programs. They require the HESI as well? Oh, it's like TEAS or HESI. I would do TEAS, not HESI, because TEAS you can actually, it's a predictable test, where the HESI, you have to take it on their timeline. Like you have to take it on their campus, and you're not sure necessarily what sections. It's more straightforward to take the TEAS. The HESI is a little bit more challenging to prep for because you got to figure out what sections they want. And then you might actually have to take the HESI more than once if different schools are going to have you do that one. So if you can avoid taking the HESI, I would do that and take the TEAS only, because the TEAS is actually applicable to more schools too. So HESI is kind of a niche test. So let's talk about what that means, what I was just saying there. So first off, let's talk about how would you register for these things. The TEAS is actually the one you can register for directly. Yes, it's administered by a lot of schools, so you can take it at a school that's administering it. But the nice thing about this is you can also take it through the PSI testing centers. So you don't have to take it associated with a particular campus. If you wanted to take it right now, you could take it right now within the next few weeks if you wanted to do that. Not that I would suggest you do it in only a few weeks. But to get signed up for the TEAS, you got to go to atitesting.com. Then you would need to apply for accommodations. This is things like extra time or test reader or screen reader or whatever it is that you might need for your accommodations if you would require them. Usually if you had accommodations in high school, you'll have a fairly easy time, I won't say easy, very straightforward time getting accommodations for the TEAS. If you only had accommodations in college, it may be difficult. You may have to get evaluated by a educational psychologist to get qualified for that. So once you go through that process, if you need to, then you would just register for the TEAS test, and you can either do it at a school, as you can see, like in here, there's a lot of different institutions that offer it. You could just say, okay, which institution you're going to want to apply to, or you can actually scroll down and take it at a PSI center. As you see, like this is a big list. You just scroll down and you would actually find the PSI testing center option. So you can actually test it independently of any particular school and get your score that way. In fact, that's the way I took it recently, actually way back in February before the epidemic or pandemic hit. I actually signed up and took it at a PSI center off of US 50 in Sacramento. So there's that option as well, which I actually think that's probably the more convenient option. When it comes to the HES, so if you need to retake the test, you can do it every 30 days if you wanted to. So the schools that require this test might say you can only take it 3 times or 4 times or 5 times or whatever it is. Every nursing school is a little bit different on how they treat retakes on the test. Now, if you do a good job of prepping though, you probably won't have to retake. It's a fairly straightforward test. as we'll see, the content level of it is really nothing past high school. Even the science content level is probably things you got in high school. And I think that's what makes it difficult for people, is because you're expecting it to be harder and you aren't studying the right stuff. So like you have to dust off material that you probably learned a long time ago and you may not be expecting. The HESI, on the other hand, is only administered through schools that like need you to take it. So you have to do it on their timeline when they say that they have time available. And the HESI as a whole has something like 13 different sections on it, and different schools will require different sections. That's why the HESI is a hard one to take and identify what you need to study. So if you have a school that accepts either, like Samuel Merritt, then I would suggest you take the TEAS. If you have a school that only requires the HESI, you have to follow their rules. So just like get the information from the school that you're applying to, do what you got to do to take the test the way they say you need to take the test. So it's kind of a funny test in that sense. It's not something like you can prepare for it in general and take it for lots of different schools at the same time. So hopefully you guys don't have to deal with any that are HESI only. I believe Loma Linda, I want to say Loma Linda requires the HESI, but I don't know of any other schools that just go with that test alone. So that being said, let's see. Let's move on to this. What is the structure of these two tests? The TEAS, like I said, is very predictable. You're always going to start with reading, then you're going to have math, then you're going to have a break, then you're going to have science, then you're going to have English language and usage. So in each section, you're going to get some scored questions, some unscored questions. They don't identify the unscored questions. They're just regular questions as far as the test is concerned. So make sure you try hard on all of these and all the questions. Don't assume that it's a unscored question because it's weird or something like that. So then you have varying time per section. It's kind of unusual in that sense, but the number of questions varies anywhere from 53 questions on the reading section and the science sections to down to 28 total questions on the English and language usage. So it's a bit variable. You have roughly a minute per question, a minute and a half when it comes to the math. You really don't need the minute and a half for the math because the math questions are generally no more difficult than doing algebra. So the questions usually involve like some basic calculation or some basic manipulation of an equation, and that's really about it. Do take the break. So it's a fairly short test. It's 3 hours, 45 minutes. Most people walk out with time to spare. Usually time is not the issue with this thing. And in fact, that's another problem with people with the TEAS is they tend to rush. And so I see people walk out in 2 hours and go, yeah, I crushed it, and then not get a great score. And that's because you probably should have slowed down a little bit because the questions were maybe a little trickier than you thought they were going to be. So take your time. You have 3 hours, 45 minutes to do the whole thing and use as much of that as you can. The HESI, and here you go, bam, here it is. Math, reading comp, vocab, grammar, chemistry, A&P, biology, physics, learning styles, personality styles. All of these are possible sections that are available on the question. Yes, learning styles and personality styles is also part of this test if the school chooses to do it. Now, some of these sections do not get used that much. I don't believe Loma Linda uses physics or A&P, or the chemistry for that matter. I think they test all the other things, but they leave those sections out. But it's really up to the school that uses this series of tests which of the individual subtests they use. It's up to them how they administer it and the timing of it. So the fact that there's variable numbers of breaks, or you might have to go straight through, or if you had to do all the sections, it takes about 7 hours plus breaks. It's really variable. I can't say much more about it because every school that uses the HESI has a slightly different administration for it. So, and by the way, HESI A2 is what it's technically called, because there's a lot of different HESI tests out there. So if you're looking for prep materials on the HESI, it should be looking for the HESI A2 or academic assessment. That's what the A2 stands for. So there's not much to say about the structure of this one since it's suggested. Notice the time is suggested. They could give you more or less time on the different sections as well. It's up to the school. Now, how do these things get scored? The TEAS get scored basically by just saying how many % correct you get out of 150 questions. So that's straight up, it's a percentage, that's all it is. And then they also give you a percentile rank, how you compare to other people taking the test. So it's scaled, not curved. So this percentile rank is determined ahead of time. So you're not being compared to, say, the people that took the test that day or even that week. You're compared to the people that took it like basically over all time in their scoring grid. There's no guessing penalty on a test like this. So you should guess no matter what. Even if you don't know the answer, eliminate a couple answers and just do your best guess. It's better lucky than wrong, I suppose. So it's okay to guess on questions on this thing. And yes, like I said, there's unscored experimental questions. We just don't know what they are, and they hide it behind all the numbers. The HESI is scored in much the same way. It's the number correct out of. I just left it 150, but it could be 250, it could be 100, it could be however many questions that they administer would be what it is. As far as I'm aware, you do not get a percentile score because they really can't create percentiles for a test like this because there's no data to support that. Since everybody that tests kind of has a different version of the test, they can't really do percentiles. So the schools internally use just what % correct that you got. There's no guessing penalty on this one either. So even on the unscored experimental questions, just guess. It's okay to guess because, hey, better lucky than wrong. That's the rule. So what is the content or what are target scores on these tests? Basically, you want to get 75% or more correct. The higher you go, the more likely you are to have a good test score. Internally, the schools don't put a lot of emphasis on these things. As long as you're above 75%, like I would say, make sure you're the 80% range, maybe pushing 90% correct, and you're in a good spot for both of these things, since they're really just looking for what do you remember out of this basic content, and also how well do you take tests. At the end of the day, when you're talking about standardized tests don't get used to predict your performance in a school, in a program. Standardized tests get used to predict your ability to take standardized tests for certification. So like when you start to be a practicing nurse, you're gonna have to take an NCLEX. So the TEAS or the HESI is an estimate of how well you could perform on the NCLEX. And guess what? The NCLEX is written by the same people that write the TEAS. So, hey, there you go. Now, what content it is on there? The the TEAS, far more easy to establish what the range of content is on this thing. So the first section here is going to be the reading comprehension. And so you see that it breaks down into 3 topics: key ideas and details, craft and structure, and then integration of knowledge and ideas. Basically, the first topic there is they might give you instructions on how to make a cake. I'm not kidding, that is a passage. They might give you instructions on how to make a cake and say what step has to be done before which other step. That's a key ideas and details. You're basically being asked to figure out where things are in the passage and how they relate to other things. Craft and structure would be, they give you a little short essay about the Washington Monument, and then they'll say, why did the author write this part first instead of this part first? They're asking the whys the author are doing things, so to like get into like what's the structure doing for the meaning. And then they'll ask the more extended questions, which will say, well, if what was said in the passage is true, this is topic 3, then what would also be true, or what also relates, what is similar. So For the most part, you'll see it's almost half those retrieval questions and half those questions asking about why the author said it a certain way. As a whole, the reading comprehension here is very low. You should be able to read all of the passages in total before you answer the questions and be able to remember them, because the passages are usually not more than 2 to 3 paragraphs. I think that's why people sometimes struggle with it, because it's too easy to miss details because you rush. Because people often with reading comprehension think they have to rush. Totally take your time, slow down, like read and chew and digest all the things that are in the passage, and then go answer the questions, and you should be doing just fine. The next section is the math, and you'll see numbers and algebra, topic 1, and measurement and data, topic 2. Measurement and data, they might give you a ruler measuring something, and you have to read the ruler to the nearest tick mark. So you have to learn, make sure you remember how to read a ruler properly, or read a graduated cylinder properly, or things like that. Or they actually have clock questions. So reading time off a standard, not digital, but standard clock with hands. The number and algebra questions, the thing that I think gets people on those is that it's stuff you might not have done since middle school or early high school. That you might get a question that asks you median versus mean. If I add a number to a data set, which one changes faster? Or they might ask you, what's the least common multiple of these two numbers? Or what's basically basic statistic topics like quartiles, how do quartiles work? And they're things you've learned, but it's so old, you've been like, wow, I totally forgot how to do that. So just do some brushing up on the basic content. I'll give you some books, show you some companies' books that do a good job of brushing that up for you. The human anatomy and physiology section isn't really, or the science section isn't really heavy, hardcore science. You're over prepared for it having gone to Davis. So you don't have to think as hard as you might have to. So the human anatomy and physiology, that's basically high school level A&P, like the shin bone's connected to the whatever bone and blah, blah, blah. You're not getting into deep, dark details like all the specifics of Krebs cycle or glyconeogenesis or glycolysis or anything like that. Just in general, like what are the organelles in a cell? All of these can be found in a prokaryotic cell except. All of these can be found in a eukaryotic cell except. That level of question. Life and physical sciences, what we're talking about there is you might get a handful of chemistry questions and or physics questions. Those questions will be probably mostly focused upon like basic concepts of acidity, basicity, and that's all I saw. Really nothing else. It's very basic stuff. So no pun intended with acidity, basicity. I wouldn't be worried too much about chemistry or physics there. Scientific reasoning is understanding why things are done in experiments. So understanding the scientific method. And the last section is English language. It's basically grammar, grammar structure. So you have to correct grammar problems. So like find the right word, than versus then, your versus you are, like your, there versus there. Those types of things are going to be in that section. And like proper usage of punctuation, like commas and semicolons and colons. And again, this is stuff you may not even have done since grade school, where you might have to just do a little bit of refresh on that. So So you've had no audio this entire time until just now? So it went out just a second ago, a minute ago, 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago? Oh, okay. So I think that was my dog bumping into my computer. So sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Okay. Sorry, my dog has been acting really weird. He's sick and he wants to like be right up underneath my legs and he keeps jamming himself past my computer. And I think he's knocking my headset loose. Sorry about that, guys. So what I was saying for the HESI is that the math, the reading, the vocab, the grammar, and the bio, very much the same as what you're going to see on the TEAS. Where it gets to be beefier is the chemistry, the A&P, and the physics. And that's why you'll see a lot of the schools don't actually use any of those three sections. But you have to be now aware for this test, you're going to get questions about general physics, general chemistry, and then A&P. And the weirdest thing is that for uh, nursing, a lot of times physics of this level isn't required for some of those programs. So it's just really bizarre that they have it set up this way. So what you're probably seeing is what you'll probably see is the HESI that you'll take if you have to take one is not going to include chemistry, A&P, or physics. So, but if you do, you're going to have to do probably a longer prep. Instead of about 2 months, I'd be looking at 3 months, just so you can give yourself time to go through those topics in a bit more detail. So, because when they say anatomy, they mean like anatomy, a lot more than what the TEAS is actually going for. So, if you, like I said, I'll say it one more time. If you can avoid taking the HESI, it's worth avoiding taking the HESI. So, what are the prerequisites for the TEAS? Really, honestly, the things you have to have before you prepare for the TEAS is general bio and general chemistry. I actually think human physio and human anatomy will over prepare you for this test, and will like if you want to take this right after you take general bio, general chem, it's not a bad thing. It just what you got to worry about at that point is aging out the test. Where if a school says it has to be within 3 years, you might wait longer to do it. So just got to be careful with that. But like you don't need to have physio and anatomy for the TEAS. For the HESI, you should probably have your physics under your belt, maybe your human physio and your human anatomy class. If you're going to take the full HESI, including the A&P section and the physics section. So you would probably end up taking the HESI more near your application time than you would have to with the TEAS. But again, HESI, that's a very school specific thing. Prep resources for the TEAS. Kaplan actually has TEAS prep resources. It's probably the better set right now, the best set right now of materials you can get for the HESI, just because they're one of the bigger companies. They have a lot of money they can invest into doing it. Trivium, Mometrics, Essentia, they're all smaller companies. They only do some of these sort of aftermarket tests. And I say that because not a lot of people take the TEAS. Definitely not a lot of people take the HESI. So their materials are not necessarily as well produced as Kaplan is, but they're a lot cheaper. So you can find them all on Amazon for fairly low price. And then there is official content, although I will say it's pretty expensive for what you get. You get a book and you get 2 tests, I think is the total number of tests you get from atitesting.com/TEAS. It's probably better to go with something like Kaplan or the other cheaper options like Trivium, Mometrics, or Essentia. The biggest problem you're going to have is finding practice tests. So that's the only thing I think the ATI testing official content's worth getting for is you get the practice test to go with it. The HESI is even more difficult to prep for. Kaplan does have a HESI materials, so do Trivium, Mometrics, and Essentia, but there are no official practice tests for this test. If you're going to practice, you're going to have to do the same stuff again and again and again, you don't really get to have a lot of different options there for practice, unfortunately. As far as timeline goes, for the TEAS, like I said, probably 2 months at least to study for this thing. The HESI, if you're taking more of the sections, I would up that to 3 months as a minimum time frame. What you want to do is take at least five full practice tests if you can, and that might mean retaking the same practice test multiple times. But honestly, that's okay. It's our right to do that. Um, and do a practice test right away. The earlier you do a practice test, the better. So you'll want to make sure that you have some uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, some familiarity with the test before you actually start studying for it. That way you know what you're actually studying for. It's difficult to study for something when you don't know what's on it. Like, think that professor that doesn't provide homework practice problems or old exams, and you're studying for that test. Is it easy or hard to know what to expect with that test coming up? I'm going to assume you probably think it's hard, because most people do. Like, you have no idea what's coming. So take that practice test up front, and you're going to have an easier time overall. Um, don't try to do everything all at once. Try to just rotate through the different subject areas. Like, pick Monday, Wednesdays to be your, you know, reading and grammar days. Pick Tuesdays and Thursdays to be your math and science days if you're practicing for the TEAS. And review the content in these books to make sure you know the content, and then do some practice problems all the time for, you know, making sure you're getting better at recognizing what you're supposed to be doing. You could basically set yourself up to like study 2 to 3 hours per day, 5-ish days a week, and really be pretty solid in 2 months for the TEAS. You got to just put a calendar together and you're okay. Like I said, for the HESI, if you're doing the additional subjects, then you're going to need a little bit more time to do that, because you'll need the extra time for the chemistry and the physics most likely. So, what I'll do at this point then is I'm going to open it up for questions. What kind of questions do you have? Any specifics? Any other tests that are out there that you're worried about? Because I know nursing tends to sort of come up with these things out of their flim flams of like where they're coming with these tests. So, what kind of questions do you have for me? TEAS testing dates. If you go back, like when you go to the ATI um, registration, once you select the location that you're going to take it, it'll give you the dates that it's available. So there are no, like, it's not like a limited set of dates. It's kind of like the way the GRE works, in that anytime the testing center is open, wherever it's open, they have the ability to do the TEAS. So it's whenever they have availability and you have availability at the same time, you can register for the test. So like the way I registered for mine is I registered for it like 3 weeks in advance, and I got it was like a Friday morning in 9 a.m. I think it was the start time. No problem. Any other questions? righty. Well, looks like there's no other questions then. So thank you guys for coming today. And let me know, like you can always schedule an appointment with me directly if you want to start working on something specific for your plan. I do appointments in the mornings right now, 9 to 12, or you can come to study hall office hours until the end of the year, which are Monday or Wednesday from 2 to 5. The drop-in link is right here at hpa.ucdavis.edu/testprep. So I'm happy to help you guys out, figure out what works for you the best. No problem. Have a good one.